There comes a moment in every human life where something inside wakes up. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not announced with fireworks or applause. It usually happens in a quiet second, the kind of second where you feel life pressing you, asking something from you. And in that moment, you realize you're standing at a crossroads. Not the kind made of dirt and stone, but the kind made of identity. The kind that asks you not what you want to achieve, but who you want to be. And the truth is the quality of your life, the direction of your destiny, and the meaning you feel each day are shaped by that single decision. Most people don't make that decision consciously. They drift. They adapt to circumstances. They respond to pressures. They do what they've always done because it's familiar, comfortable, predictable. But familiar doesn't mean fulfilling. Comfortable doesn't mean alive. And predictable doesn't mean purposeful. Somewhere along the way, we forget that identity is not something you inherit. It's something you build. It's a choice. It's a declaration. It's a commitment to a version of yourself that does not yet exist, but must exist if your life is going to change. The moment you decide who you want to be is the moment you reclaim authorship of your own story. It's the moment you stop letting the past dictate the future. It's the moment you interrupt the momentum of old habits, old patterns, old emotions, and say, I choose this path, not because it's easy, but because it aligns with the person I am committed to becoming. Most people underestimate the power of identity. They think success is about strategy, about tactics, about motivation. Those matter, but they're secondary. Identity is the engine. Identity is the force. Identity is the root from which all action grows. Think about it. When someone sees themselves as a leader, they act like one. When someone sees themselves as resilient, they find a way through any obstacle. When someone sees themselves as a creator, they bring ideas to life. But when someone sees themselves as a victim, everything becomes heavy, everything becomes unfair, everything becomes someone else's fault. And that isn't because of circumstances, it's because of identity. You will fight for the identity you believe is yours, even if it limits you. You will defend the story you've accepted, even if that story is suffocating your potential. Humans don't act in alignment with what they want. They act in alignment with who they believe they are. So the question becomes, who do you want to be? Not someday. Not when life gets easier. Not when you figure everything out. Who do you want to be now? Because all transformation starts with a declaration, not a wish. Not a preference, a declaration. A line in the sand. A moment where you say, this is the standard I'm raising. This is the identity I'm claiming. This is the version of myself I'm stepping into. And that decision becomes the filter for every action, every emotion, every habit. If you declare that you are someone who honors their word, suddenly integrity becomes non-negotiable. If you declare that you are someone who takes care of their body, suddenly health becomes a priority. If you declare that you are someone who leads with courage, suddenly fear becomes a challenge, not a barrier. And if you declare that you are someone who creates impact, suddenly excuses lose their power. Identity is the foundation of destiny. But here's what most people don't realize. Deciding who you want to be requires giving up who you used to be. You can't hold on to both. You can't claim the identity of strength while clinging to the habits of weakness. You can't claim the identity of confidence while repeating the patterns of self-doubt. You can't claim the identity of purpose while living in distraction. Every identity requires a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is always the same, the older version of you, and that's where people get stuck. Not because they don't know what they want, not because they lack dreams, but because the old identity is familiar. Even if it's painful, even if it limits you, it feels safe because you've lived there for so long. Change feels threatening, not because the new identity is wrong, but because uncertainty always feels like danger to a brain that's wired for survival, not fulfillment. But survival is not the goal is to live, to expand, to rise, to unlock the layers of potential that you've buried under years of fear, doubt, and hesitation. And you cannot do that until you decide, until you choose, until you take full ownership of the identity that matches the life you want. There's a moment, and maybe you've felt it, where you're tired of your own excuses, where you're exhausted from the patterns that repeat themselves year after year, where you wake up and think, I'm done living below my potential. I'm done settling for less. I'm done telling myself stories that shrink my life. And in that moment, something shifts. You begin to realize that no one is coming to rescue you. No one is coming to hand you a new identity, and no one is going to give you permission to become who you were meant to be. You must give yourself that permission. You must decide. And that decision is not emotional hype. It's the beginning of discipline. It's the beginning of new standards. It's the beginning of shaping your internal world so the external world cannot control you anymore. When you know who you are, circumstances don't define you. When you know who you are, setbacks don't stop you. When you know who you are, you move through fear, through confusion, through uncertainty with a sense of grounded strength. But let's address something honestly. Identity isn't built in a single moment. It begins in a moment. It starts with a decision, but it is reinforced through repetition, through action, through commitment, through the willingness to show up even when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired, even when doubt whispers that nothing is changing. Because identity isn't created by what you occasionally do. It's created by what you consistently commit to. If you want to be someone who shapes their destiny, prove it through daily choices. If you want to be someone who leads others, demonstrate it through your actions, not your intentions. If you want to be someone who rises in the face of adversity, then when difficulty appears, embrace it as the training ground for your future self. Identity becomes real through evidence. You create that evidence every day. But here's the beauty day. Once that identity is built, truly built, it becomes harder not to act that version of yourself. Think about that. In the beginning, discipline feels difficult, but eventually it becomes natural because it aligns with who you are. At first, courage feels terrifying, but eventually it becomes instinct because it aligns with your identity. At first, consistency feels like a battle, but eventually it becomes effortless because it's simply what you do. The moment you decide who you want to be is the moment you set your life on a new trajectory, but you must hold that vision long enough for it to become internalized. You must feed it. You must strengthen it. You must embody it. You must be willing to disappoint the old version of you in order to become the new one. Most people are loyal to their past. They're loyal to their limitations. They're loyal to the patterns that have held them back. They're loyal to their fears. But your future demands a different loyalty. Loyalty to growth, loyalty to possibility, loyalty to the identity that matches your highest self. Have you ever noticed that there are moments where something inside you whispers you're meant for more? Not in an egotistical way, not in a way that says you're better than anyone else, but in a quiet, undeniable way that says you haven't even scratched the surface of your potential. That whisper is your future self calling you. That whisper is your true identity trying to break through the noise of old patterns. That whisper is life saying, wake up, step forward, decide. If you ignore that whisper long enough, it becomes a faint ache, a sense of misalignment, a quiet dissatisfaction. But if you answer it, if you listen, if you respond, it becomes fire, it becomes clarity, it becomes certainty. And certainty is not something life gives you. It's something you create by aligning your identity with your destiny. Let me tell you something powerful. The world does not respond to your wishes. The world responds to your identity. If you show up as someone who hesitates, life will give you more reasons to hesitate. If you show up as someone who doubts themselves, life will mirror that doubt back to you. But if you show up as someone committed, someone determined, someone willing to grow, life bends toward that energy. Doors open. Opportunities appear. People respond differently, not because luck changed, but because identity changed. Your identity is the force that shapes your future. And here's what's even more powerful. Identity is a daily decision. Every morning you decide who you're going to be today. Every conversation, every choice, every action is an affirmation of that identity. And the more intentional you become, the more momentum you gather. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates action. Action reinforces identity, and identity shapes destiny. But none of that happens until you decide. So let's get clear. Who do you want to be? Not what do you want to have? Not what do you want to accomplish? Who do you want to be as a human being? What qualities do you want to embody? What standards do you want to hold? What emotional home do you want to live in? What behaviors do you want to make non-negotiable? Do you want to be someone who leads with courage? Then make courageous decisions. Do you want to be someone who cultivates discipline? Then do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. Do you want to be someone who lives with purpose? Then align your actions with your values, not your impulses. Do you want to be someone who loves deeply? Then show up with presence, appreciation, and vulnerability. Do you want to be someone who impacts others? Then elevate your thinking, your behavior, your energy. Identity is not a dream. Identity is a practice. Every great transformation begins with a declaration, yes, but it continues with action, consistent action, relentless action. Identity becomes real when you put yourself in motion. Step into the world as the version of yourself you are committed to becoming, not the version you've been conditioned to accept. The greatest tragedy is not that people fail. It's that people never decide who they want to be. They live reactively, not intentionally. They repeat yesterday because they never define tomorrow. They settle for the identity that life handed them instead of crafting the identity that life requires from them. But you are not here to drift. You are not here to settle. You are not here to shrink into a smaller version of yourself just because it's comfortable. You are here to grow, to contribute, to rise, to become. You are here to break patterns, to defy limitations, to rewrite the story of your life. But that begins with a decision, a single moment of clarity where you commit to the identity that aligns with your highest potential. Maybe today is that moment for you. Maybe right now is the moment where you draw a line between who you've been and who you must become. Maybe this is your awakening. Maybe this is the moment where something inside you says, no more shrinking, no more settling, no more living below my potential. Maybe this is the moment where you decide who you want to be, truly decide. If it is, then understand this. The decision will demand new habits, new emotions, new standards, new actions. It will require you to say no to the old patterns that have kept you stuck. It will require you to walk away from people who reinforce the identity you're outgrowing. It will require you to step into environments that stretch you, challenge you, elevate you, but that's the price of evolution. And the reward is a life that reflects your true potential. Identity is destiny, and destiny is not something you wait for. It's something you shape. The moment you decide who you want to be is the moment everything changes. Maybe not instantly, maybe not dramatically, but internally. And once the internal shifts, the external must follow. Life reorganizes itself around your newfound clarity. You begin to attract opportunities that match your identity. You begin to see paths that were invisible before. You begin to feel a sense of alignment, of purpose, of momentum. And that momentum is priceless. So ask yourself with honesty, with courage, with depth, who am I committed to being from this moment forward? If the answer is strong, if the answer is aligned, if the answer challenges you and excites you at the same time, then everything changes right here, right now. Because identity is not shaped by time, it's shaped by choice. And this is your moment of choice. You can walk through the rest of your life carrying the identity that was shaped by your past. Or you can walk forward with the identity that shapes your future. The moment you decide who you want to be is the moment you reclaim your life. Choose wisely, choose boldly, and then embody it with everything you have. Your future self is waiting. The decision to change your identity is the true beginning of transformation, because nothing in your life shifts until the inner blueprint shifts first. People try to change habits, change environments, change routines, but they never touch the root, who they believe they are. And as long as that inner identity stays the same, the external results eventually snap back to match it. Every breakthrough you want, every level you want to reach, every dream you're trying to chase begins with a decision about identity. Not something you hope for, not something you wish for on a good day, but a firm internal declaration that says, this is who I am choosing to be now. That decision creates a psychological snap, a break from the past, a disruption of the old patterns that have shaped your behavior for years. It becomes the new filter through which you interpret every action, every choice, every opportunity. When identity changes, everything else starts to reorganize around it. Most people live stuck not because they lack desire, but because they're imprisoned by an outdated identity. They say, I'm not disciplined, I'm not confident, I've always been this way, and those statements become invisible shackles. They're not describing themselves, they are defining themselves. The moment you accept an identity as absolute, you stop growing beyond it. You start acting in ways that reinforce it. You defend it even when it limits you. The brain is wired to stay consistent with who you believe you are, even if that belief is destroying your potential. This is why transformation doesn't begin with new habits, it begins with a new sense of self. When you shift the identity, the behaviors follow. When you elevate the identity, the habits rise to match it. When you choose a stronger identity, the mind begins to fight for that new reality instead of fighting to protect the old one. And that choice, that conscious decision, is powerful because it interrupts years of conditioning. Every identity you've held until now was shaped by repetition, by emotion, by environment, by what people told you, by what you interpreted from your experiences. But just because it was shaped unconsciously doesn't mean it must stay unconscious. You have the ability to choose the identity you want to step into next. That choice is the first step toward becoming the version of yourself you've always known you could be. When you decide who you want to be, you take back authority over your life. You stop being a passenger and become the driver. You stop waiting for something outside of you to change and start shifting the one thing that has the power to change everything inside of you. Making that decision isn't just about imagining a new version of yourself. It's about committing to it deeply, emotionally, relentlessly. You must make that identity feel more real than your history, more real than your fears, more real than the opinions of others. When a person truly decides that their identity has changed, their behavior aligns naturally. Discipline stops feeling like a battle and becomes a natural expression of who they are. Courage stops feeling like a rare burst and becomes a consistent response because the identity they chose demands it. People think action creates identity, but it's identity that fuels action. When you say, I am this kind of person now, your brain begins searching for ways to prove it true. And the more evidence you create, the stronger the identity becomes. This decision is the beginning of transformation because it becomes the foundation for every belief that follows. Once you declare who you want to be, you stop negotiating with your old patterns. You stop giving power to excuses that belong to a previous version of yourself. You begin to make choices based on your future, not your history. That single shift changes the emotional home you live in. If you decide you are someone who takes control of your life, hesitation loses its grip. If you decide you are someone who follows through, procrastination becomes suffocating instead of familiar. If you decide you are someone capable of greatness, challenges become proof of growth rather than evidence of limitation. Identity is the invisible architect of your life. It shapes what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you believe you deserve. If someone believes they're not worthy of success, they sabotage opportunities. If someone believes they're destined for impact, they find ways to create it. If someone believes they're powerless, they wait for permission. If someone believes they're unstoppable, they create momentum even in impossible situations. All of that flows from identity. And identity shifts the moment you decide it must shift, not when life forces you, not when conditions are perfect, but when you commit internally to the person you must become. This decision becomes the anchor during moments of doubt. When fear rises, you return to identity. When challenges hit, you return to identity. When setbacks shake you, you return to identity. The old version of you might have crumbled, but the new identity creates new behaviors, new interpretations, new emotional patterns. You respond differently because you are different. And even though the external world might take time to catch up, the internal foundation has already changed. And that is where true transformation begins. The moment you decide to shift your identity is the moment you disconnect from limitation. You stop seeing your past as defining and start seeing it as data. You stop waiting for confidence and start generating it. You stop living as a continuation of what happened to you and start living as the creator of what happens next. This decision cracks open the door to a life you haven't lived yet. It invites a version of you that has been quiet, buried, and waiting for you to choose it. Identity is not something you discover, it is something you determine. And when you determine it with absolute clarity, everything in your psychology begins to align. Your focus sharpens, your energy heightens, your habits shift, your boundaries strengthen. You begin acting from a place of intention instead of reaction. You begin shaping your life instead of surviving it. You begin stepping into the person you were always meant to become, not because the world changed, but because you finally decided to change the world inside you first.